Costco has been selling a product at what is probably a loss for nearly 40 years. We're not talking about some niche promotion or a temporary marketing stunt. We're talking about the most famous product the company has ever sold, a hot dog and a soda for $1.50. That price first appeared in 1985. Since then, the average home price in America has increased more than fivefold. College tuition has exploded. Food prices have surged. Gas prices have surged. But the hot dog barely changed. Sounds ridiculous. What's even more ridiculous is who made that decision. Not a small family business, not a local grocery store. Costco is worth more than $400 billion today, more than Coca-Cola, more than Nike. For part of 2024, it was worth more than McDonald's. Now stop for a second. McDonald's operates more than 40,000 restaurants worldwide. Costco has fewer than 1,000 warehouses, yet for a period of time, both companies were valued at roughly the same level. That shouldn't make sense. Just like it shouldn't make sense that people drive to a store for toilet paper and leave with a gold bar. Yes, Costco sells gold. In 2023, some analysts estimated that the company was selling more than $100 million worth of gold every single month. We're talking about the same place where someone is buying a $4.99 rotisserie chicken just a few feet away. One customer grabs a case of bottled water. Another buys a television. A third spends several $1,000s on investment-grade gold, all at the same checkout line. And that's still not the strangest part of this story. Costco has sold caskets, vacation packages, luxury jewelry, products most people would never expect to find inside a warehouse store. Which brings us to the question investors have been trying to answer for decades. What exactly does Costco sell? Because the answer isn't food, it isn't electronics, it isn't even membership. To understand the answer, we need to go back to a man whose name most Costco shoppers have never heard. Without him, there might be no Costco, no Sam's Club, maybe even no Amazon Prime as we know it today. His name was Sol Price. In the 1970s, he came up with an idea that sounded completely insane. He wanted customers to pay for the right to shop, not for products, not for services, just for access. Today, people pay for Netflix, Spotify, and Prime memberships without thinking twice. Back then, the concept looked like a guaranteed failure. Instead, the exact opposite happened. Customers paid. Then they came back. Then they kept coming back. Eventually, that idea became one of the most powerful business models in retail history. More than 90% of Costco members renew every year. In some regions, renewal rates exceed 92%. Netflix, telecom companies, and streaming platforms spend billions trying to reduce customer churn. Costco somehow convinced more than 9 out of 10 members to return voluntarily. And that's where Wall Street's problem begins. Because while most companies spend their lives figuring out how to squeeze one more dollar out of every customer, Costco has spent decades behaving as if it's playing a completely different game. The most frustrating part for critics? The strategy worked far better than anyone expected. Apple spent decades building something that seemed almost impossible. Customers lined up outside stores before products were even available. They bought devices before reading reviews. They paid more than competitors were charging, and did it happily. Most companies dream about that kind of loyalty. Somehow, Costco created a similar effect in one of the least exciting industries imaginable. It's hard to think of a less glamorous business than selling groceries, detergent, and paper towels. Yet millions of people treat a trip to Costco like an event. Entire social media accounts exist for one purpose: tracking new Costco products. Some have hundreds of thousands of followers. People post haul videos, review new arrivals, and debate the best deals of the week. We're talking about a warehouse store, not a tech company, not a luxury brand, not a sports franchise. A warehouse store. What's even stranger is that Costco shouldn't be beating Amazon. Amazon offers a bigger selection, home delivery, better technology, more convenience, algorithms worth billions of dollars. If you looked purely at logic, Amazon should dominate. Yet Costco kept growing right alongside it. The reason is surprisingly simple. Amazon optimizes shopping. Costco turns shopping into an experience. That's a massive difference. Nobody sits down with friends and tells stories about clicking buy now. People absolutely tell stories about driving to Costco for milk and leaving with a television, a patio set, and a giant box of snacks they've never seen before. That creates another paradox. Costco is one of the largest retailers on the planet, yet it spends relatively little on traditional advertising compared to many giants. Customers do a lot of the marketing for them. They recommend products, share discoveries, discuss deals, build communities around the brand. Most companies would need enormous marketing budgets to generate that level of engagement. Costco achieved it with concrete floors and industrial shelving. But there's another part of this story that rarely gets attention: employees. It doesn't sound as exciting as gold bars or billion-dollar revenues, yet for years it was one of the biggest frustrations for investors. Costco paid workers more than many competitors, offered better benefits than much of the retail industry. To some analysts, it looked like an unnecessary expense. Then the results started showing up. Employee turnover remained lower than many rivals. Experienced workers stayed longer. Customers saw familiar faces during repeat visits. Training costs dropped. Recruitment costs dropped. Something that looked like an expense turned out to be an investment. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's longtime business partner, called Costco one of the best-run companies in America. Jeff Bezos studied its model. Sam Walton watched Sol Price's ideas before building Walmart into a retail empire. When people of that caliber keep paying attention to the same company, something unusual is happening, which leads to a fascinating question. What if Costco had listened to Wall Street from the beginning? Raise the hot dog price, raise the chicken price, increase margins, cut labor costs, extract a little more profit from every customer. Short-term earnings would almost certainly look better. The problem is that Costco was never building for the next quarter. It was building for the next decade. That's a very different game. American business history is filled with companies that won a few quarters and lost the next 20 years. Sears was once untouchable. Kodak was once untouchable. Blockbuster was once untouchable. Then came decisions optimized for the short term. A few years later, the advantage started disappearing. Costco survived the dot-com crash. It survived the 2008 financial crisis. It survived the pandemic. It survived the highest inflation in decades. Every time, predictions appeared claiming the model would finally break. Every time, Costco emerged larger than before. That's why this story is much bigger than a cheap hot dog. It's really the story of one of the strangest battles in modern business. On one side stood investors, analysts, and the logic of quarterly earnings. On the other stood a company that spent 40 years refusing to maximize profit at every possible opportunity. Looking at a valuation north of $400 billion, it's hard not to wonder whether that refusal became one of the most profitable forms of stubbornness in the history of capitalism. And the strangest part of all? The symbol of that entire philosophy isn't a revolutionary invention, a breakthrough technology, or a futuristic product. It's a hot dog that still costs $1.50. And maybe that's why so many people still don't understand what Costco is really selling. Maybe the most surprising part of the Costco story is how ordinary the company looks from the outside. There are no flashy product launches watched by millions, no futuristic technology, no luxury image designed to make people jealous. Just giant warehouses, concrete floors, industrial shelves, and products people buy every week. On the surface, it looks almost boring. Yet somehow, this boring-looking business built one of the most loyal customer bases on the planet. The numbers are almost ridiculous. More than 130 million members. Renewal rates above 90%. Hundreds of billions in annual revenue. Most companies would kill for that kind of loyalty. Costco achieved it without bombarding customers with endless promotions or spending billions on advertising campaigns. It's almost as if one of the world's strongest fan communities accidentally formed around a company that sells toilet paper and rotisserie chickens. And then there's the chicken itself. Because at some point, Costco made a decision that stunned industry observers. Instead of allowing prices to rise, the company spent hundreds of millions of dollars building its own poultry supply chain. Think about that for a second. Most corporations faced with rising costs simply pass those costs on to customers. Costco invested hundreds of millions to avoid raising the price of a chicken. That's not normal corporate behavior. That's the behavior of a company obsessed with something much bigger than a single product. The rotisserie chicken was never really about chicken. Just like the hot dog was never really about a hot dog. Both products serve a different purpose. They act as proof that Costco is willing to absorb pain today to maintain trust tomorrow. During the inflation surge after the pandemic, prices seemed to rise everywhere. Restaurants increased prices. Grocery stores increased prices. Airlines increased prices. Consumers were getting hit from every direction. Naturally, the same question kept appearing. When is Costco finally going to raise the price of the hot dog? Surely this is where the 40-year streak ends. Yet year after year, the answer remained essentially the same. Not today. In the world of public companies, that level of discipline is almost unheard of. But perhaps the most revealing number isn't the price of a hot dog. It's the average Costco receipt. Many customers arrive intending to buy a single item. Then they walk out having spent hundreds of dollars. The internet has been joking about this phenomenon for years. People drive to Costco for eggs and somehow return home with a giant television. They stop by for paper towels and leave with a kayak. They need toothpaste and somehow end up buying outdoor furniture. Normally, that sounds like an exaggeration. At Costco, it's practically a stereotype. And stereotypes don't survive for decades unless there's some truth behind them. Which raises an interesting question. Is Costco really a retailer, or is it something closer to an amusement park for consumers? It sounds ridiculous until you look at the behavior. People don't always visit because they need something specific. They visit because they want to see what's there. They want to discover something unexpected. They want the possibility of finding a deal they weren't looking for. That's not how people behave in most stores. That's how people behave in places designed around curiosity. And curiosity is one of the most powerful forces in business. Because once a company turns shopping into entertainment, it stops competing on price alone. It stops competing on convenience alone. It starts competing for attention. And attention is one of the most valuable resources in the modern economy, which helps explain why so many companies have tried to copy Costco and so few have succeeded. The warehouses can be copied. The membership card can be copied. The low prices can be copied. The giant product packaging can be copied. None of those things are the secret. The secret is much harder to replicate. It took decades to build. It survives because millions of customers believe the company is playing a different game than everyone else. Whether that's completely true is almost irrelevant. In business, perception often becomes reality, and Costco may be one of the greatest examples of that principle ever created. Imagine what happens when a company spends 40 years convincing customers that it will consistently put long-term trust ahead of short-term profit. Eventually, people stop questioning it. They simply believe it. And once that happens, you've built something that competitors can't easily buy, copy, or steal. That's why the real product Costco sells isn't food. It isn't electronics. It isn't memberships. It isn't even convenience. The real product is confidence. Confidence that the company won't squeeze every possible dollar out of you today. Confidence that the deal is fair. Confidence that you'll probably come back next month. And when a business earns that level of confidence from more than 100 million people, something extraordinary happens. It stops acting like a retailer and starts acting like an institution. Which brings us back to where this story began. A hot dog, a soda, a price tag that hasn't changed since 1985. On paper, it looks insignificant. In reality, that $1.50 hot dog may be one of the most successful business decisions ever made. Because if Costco raised the price to $2.50 tomorrow, almost nobody would stop shopping there. The company would make millions more. Analysts would applaud. Investors would celebrate. But something far more valuable would disappear. A symbol, a promise, a message that customers have been receiving for nearly 4 decades. Looking at a company worth more than $400 billion today, it's hard to avoid one conclusion. That humble hot dog might be the most profitable loss leader in the history of capitalism. At this point, you might be wondering whether Costco's strategy could ever fail. After all, every business model eventually runs into limits. Walmart was unstoppable until Amazon arrived. Sears dominated American retail until it didn't. Entire industries have been turned upside down by companies nobody saw coming. So why should Costco be any different? It's a fair question, and the answer might be the most fascinating part of this entire story. Because Costco's biggest threat may not come from competitors. It may come from success itself. The company now serves more than 130 million members worldwide. Its warehouses generate some of the highest sales per location in retail history. In some years, a single Costco warehouse produces several times more revenue than a typical Walmart store. Think about that for a second. Fewer locations, fewer products, less advertising, yet extraordinary sales volumes. That's incredibly powerful. But it also creates a challenge. How do you keep surprising customers when you're already one of the biggest retailers on earth? How do you maintain the feeling of discovery when millions of people are sharing every new product online within hours? How do you stay disciplined when Wall Street sees billions of dollars in potential profit still sitting on the table? Those questions become harder every year. And yet Costco keeps making decisions that seem almost irrational from the outside. Consider this. Many retailers obsess over data. Every click, every purchase, every customer interaction. Costco has access to mountains of data too. But instead of turning itself into a hyper-optimized algorithm, it continues relying on a surprisingly simple formula. Limited selection, high trust, membership loyalty, strong value. The strategy sounds almost old-fashioned. in an era dominated by artificial intelligence and machine learning. Yet the results speak for themselves, because customers don't always remember the cheapest price. They don't always remember the fastest delivery. They remember how a company made them feel. And Costco has spent 40 years creating the feeling that somebody is looking out for the customer instead of trying to maximize every transaction. Whether that's entirely true doesn't matter nearly as much as the fact that millions of people believe it. That's the hidden asset Wall Street struggled to measure for decades. You can put inventory on a balance sheet, but how do you calculate trust? How do you assign a number to a customer who renews a membership every year for 20 years? How do you measure the value of someone who convinces their friends and family to join? That's where the Costco story becomes bigger than retail, bigger than memberships, bigger than hot dogs. It's really a story about something most businesses spend their entire existence trying to build and very few ever achieve. A reputation so strong that customers voluntarily choose you even when cheaper, faster, or more convenient alternatives exist. And maybe that's why the hot dog matters so much. Not because of the product itself, not because of the price, but because it represents an idea, a reminder that sometimes the most valuable business decisions aren't the ones that generate the most money today. They're the ones that convince customers to come back tomorrow. And then the day after that. And the year after that. 4 decades later, Costco isn't one of the world's most valuable retailers because it discovered some secret pricing formula or revolutionary technology. It's there because it turned consistency into a competitive advantage. In a world where companies constantly change strategies, redesign products, and chase the next trend, Costco kept sending the same message year after year. And eventually, millions of customers believed it. That's why this story was never really about a hot dog. The hot dog was simply the evidence, the visible symbol of a philosophy that transformed a warehouse retailer into a company worth more than $400 billion. A company that somehow convinced millions of people to pay for the privilege of shopping there. And if that sounds strange, that's because it is. But then again, almost everything about Costco is.